Okay, this morning we're listening to String Quartet number 2 by Benjamin Britten. I don't know if Britten needs an introduction because he's so successful and famous, but suffice to say he was most successful in the opera world. His big break was an opera called Peter Grimes, and he's one of the most probably the most famous British composer of the 20th century. I went through a bit of a Britten phase in my 20s, and I listened to a lot of his instrumental works, his Metamorphoses after Ovid, his Sinfonia de Requiem, his War Requiem, his Fantasy Quartet, and his string quartets. He wrote 3 string quartets. The first one is an early work. The only thing I really remember about the first one is that it starts extremely high, with every musician playing at the extreme high register of their instrument. And I remember that the third one is from his later period where he was trying to write atonal almost, or serial pieces, and in my opinion that's like his least successful writing. But his string quartet number 2, the reason why I own it is it was my favorite one and the one I listened to the most. It was written for the Zorian string quartet in 1945, I want to say, so just barely a post-war work, and it was performed on the anniversary of Henry Purcell's, I can't remember if it was his death or his birth, but it was like a 250th anniversary of another famous British composer, you could say, or English composer. It has there's 3 movements, and the third movement is like 20 minutes long. The third movement is like a theme and variations that is very gigantic, and every performer has a solo in addition to a bunch of variations. The second movement is really fast and unique and memorable, and then the first movement is the one that my memory is the most foggy on. It's probably, just looking at the theme here, I kind of remember it having a lot of flat 6, in a C major. It's a pretty lopsided piece. The last movement is way too big and bloated, but I think that's part of its charm. And but part of me does think that it could be like the last movement could just be a piece on its own. I'm going to be looking at the Hawk's Pocket score. That's also what my PDF is. And there's no program notes or anything here, so I think I'm just going to have to jump into it, and I'll let you know my thoughts, things that stood out for me on this listen. So I'm pretty pleased with myself for revisiting this. This was really nostalgic for me and a fun listen. I think I have to start with talking about the third movement because it's just so good. I don't know what possessed Britten to add 3 cadenzas to a theme and variations with 21 variations, but I mean, it really works. Sometimes more is more, and it kind of divided the movement up into sections. After the cello's cadenza, things get a little bit weird, but after the viola cadenza, when he introduces the theme from the first movement, it just gets like trippy. I have no other word to describe it. Like it feels like you're being, just rolled out into a pancake or something. It just gets so far from the original theme. It's so weird and strange. And then he sort of kind of shoehorns in the ending. But what I found most interesting on this listen was just how far he pushed that theme. It's a slow theme too, so it's a very like sedating kind of effect. And it feels even longer because of the like agogic, I don't even know how to describe it, the da-dum kind of rhythms. It's like just every measure feels gigantic. So yeah, I think like probably my favorite theme and variations ever. And the other movements are okay too. The first movement had a pretty clear sonata form, and I liked the themes, but it really had sort of long development syndrome. I felt like the development had multiple sections with different sequences, and there was one point where like one repetition of a sequence took like, I don't know, 14 measures. Like a really long time to ask for the listener to pay attention. And I don't know if this is an incorrect analysis, but to my ears, like by the time the development ended, we were already at the coda, so there wasn't really much of a recapitulation. I mean, you could probably do a thematic breakdown that argues something else, but harmonically, I felt like it didn't settle into the tonic until the coda. So that could have been why when I was younger, I had a rough time like latching onto the first movement. It has a super strong like exposition. I think that's the part that most people will remember. The second movement too has this like, it never really gets back to the first theme. So I think that's sort of a trend in this piece of like once things start developing, you can't really go back kind of thing. Yeah, I would say his thematic writing and his harmonic language is very similar to Prokofiev, but maybe a little bit more dissonant at points. That's pretty typical Britten. I think the only thing that really stood out compared to his other pieces was just like the last movement being the size that it is and scope that it is. Yeah, very, very trippy piece. So that was String Quartet number 2. If you like Britten, I think it's a must listen. If you don't really like Britten, I think it's better than the other 2 string quartets. So if you have to listen to one, listen to this one. And yeah, tomorrow we're going to be moving on to Bar Talk, and where we still got a ways to go because there are some string quartets that didn't get organized correctly in the spreadsheet. So we're going to go back in time a little bit and then forward in time, and then we should be ready to start something new around episode 28, 29.